So, as I've alluded to, the demographic schemes that the elites are definitely not getting as they age and shrink, they are withholding all the wealth and human potential for all of us to flourish. And ultimately, the two-party system, they don't really see the nuances in this. So, this is ultimately where we're leading up to Project 2025 because the right wing are essentially the quote unquote originalism of the nation. So if you don't know what originalism is, it's basically like if when people are in a debate and they like to go back to like the founding fathers and use the quotes and the rhetoric and what they were saying at the time, which doesn't really, it's not compatible with the now, honestly. So the birth dearth, aging, and the economy. Where have we been and where are we going? So this is essentially a national security crisis for these people. So I believe in Project 2025, and with this issue, this book was written in the 90s, obviously, in the birth earth in the 80s. Um, there's a plan to slash Social Security because the elderly are a burden, and taking away abortion has already happened. Taking away contraception, putting people in a position where if they have a child, they're stuck with it. So it's essentially like, mm, I don't want to say rape, but yeah. So, all right. Where have we been and where are we going? So, I think this is a bit of a leap, probably, for some people to take this population issue and use it to explain why Project 2025 is being instilled into the nation. I mean, it is a national security issue, is obviously a population issue, anti-abortion, uh, immigration is definitely a population control scheme. So, alright. In his recent volume, The Birth Dearth, Benjamin Wattenberg sees the American economy fettered by low fertility and an aging population as grinding to a virtual halt over the next century. Wattenberg writes for a popular audience in self-styled, speculative, and provocative fashion. So, this is true, it is grinding to a halt, but the reaction to it within the system itself is why it's most disturbing. So, all these things could have been cured very delicately, but because these are used as wedges to culture wars as our system is collapsing, these pieces are being used, you know, to pretend like we care about them and we like pass it around back and forth and nothing ever gets done. So, and this is why automation is essentially taking place and rolling out, I think, because it's not like we're really agreeing on anything culturally speaking. And population and demographic issues has always been a hot button issue. So maybe it's more PC and less problematic in some weird way to just use machines and not use people, which it does make sense, and we could use automation to help us instead of the next thing to just phase us out because they don't want to pay us and help our families and essentially riling up the far right. And for the most part, I mean, the right wing and the Democrats are in the pockets of the rich, so but his work forms the tip of a substantial iceberg of recent scholarly opinion, offering similar and even wider-ranging arguments about the longer-term economic prospects of the United States and other advanced industrial economies. In a nutshell, recent low rates of childbearing, the birth dearth, by causing lower negative population growth and population aging, are seen as exerting a serious drag on the economy. This happens because of slower growth of markets, decreased productivity growth, and an increased burden of dependency. These arguments are typically long on speculation but short on facts, especially with regard to history. I propose here to offer a corrective. First, uh, one, I recapitulate briefly the theoretical arguments and note some counterarguments that have been advanced. Then I turn to the historical facts and assess the arguments in light of the actual experience, both that of the United States and of advanced Western and Northern European countries. If population growth plays such an important role in determining economic growth, then one would expect to find that population growth and economic growth go together. Is this in fact the case, and how do prospective rates of population growth compare with past experience? Are they, for example, far lower than what has been before? What of the outlook for the dependency burden? Does this involve magnitudes that appear unprecedented? How has economic growth varied with the dependency burden in the past? How serious is the prospective aging of the labor supply as distinct from population? What are the implications of aging for the educational attainment of the labor supply? In discussing these questions, I take as given, as do Wattenberg and others, the current projections of population stagnation here and abroad. Typically, these projections of population stagnation here and abroad, typically these populations come in three variations: high, middle, and low, with a middle projection being most favored. But even the high fertility projection assumes only a modest eventual increase in rates of childbearing, to an average of around 2.1 births per woman. This magnitude of 2.1 is called replacement level fertility because it is the rate of childbearing per woman needed to maintain population size constant over the long run. These projections, whether low, middle, or high, of future low fertility are critical to the forecasting of stagnation population and rising old dependency. But how much confidence can we place in projections that seek to peer a half century or more into the future? Does the history of population forecasting, and particularly of projections of rates of childbearing, argue for accepting these forecasts? If not, would alternative forecasts substantially alter the outlook for population aging? In the concluding section, I address these questions, in short, the prospective continuation of the birth dearth itself. Effects of the population on the economy. Theoretical arguments. The theoretical arguments are two general types, one relating to impacts of population change in the demands for goods, the other relating to the impact on the supply or production capabilities of the economy. For specific references, see Easterlin 1991. The demand argument focuses on the effect of the declining rate of population growth. The growth rate of population, it is said, governs the growth rate of markets and thus the demands for consumer goods, and also capital goods such as housing, factories, and machinery. Declining population growth discourages businesses, causing markets to expand less rapidly or cause to grow altogether. Or cease to grow altogether, sorry. The arguments about supply side effects stress the impact of population aging. The population is seen as comprising three parts: young, middle-aged, and older, with the older segments growing relative to the other two. Now assume that for any given attribute affecting production capabilities, say physical strength, and older group is relatively low, other things being constant. If the elderly share of the populations grow, then the average degree of physical strength in the population as a whole will decline. Aging of the population would thus reduce production capability by lowering the physical capacity of the population. The specific attributes to which this argument is applied are numerous. The older population is supposed to be less well educated and thus less skilled. The older population is assumed to be less likely to save and thereby to finance capital accumulation. The older population is said to be more fixed in its ways, less innovative and creative, and thus an obstacle to technological progress. The older population is claimed to be less geographically and occupationally mobile, and therefore less able to take advantage of the new opportunities essential to economic progress. In combination, these arguments assert that, in general, aging of the population will retard the growth of production capabilities by lowering the quality of labor supply, reducing the rate of capital accumulation, and lessening the rate of technical progress. In addition, the older population is said to be different in a type of dependency burden it presents. per capita public expenditures on retirement and health are greater for the older population. Hence, as the proportion of elderly uh, grows, so too will the proportion of taxes to the income needed to finance public retirement and health spending. Thus, the burden of old age dependency raises the specter of unsupportable tax burden on the working age population, lowering the motivation of workers to work and save. So, this also plays into the fact that the rich are hoarding economic opportunities. So, this is sort of throwing them under the bus because of how the system was adjusted, you know, because at this point in society, there's single mothers, and it's relatively functional, and elderly are not living usually in large families anymore. They're usually in retirement homes or living alone with a caretaker, I assume. So, you know, it's not necessarily true that they're simply a burden. It's how things were adjusted and pretty much the opportunity being hoarded. Okay, although this is a formidable set of arguments, it has not gone without challenge. Regarding the demand argument, is to it is pointing out that markets depend on total spending, not spending of spenders. Even with the number of spenders constant, spending per person and thus total spending will continue to rise per capita income grows. On the supply side, it is pointed out that arguments about physical strength are dubious relevance to the labor force dominated by white collar and service workers. Whether older workers are less educated depends on the historical nature of the educational progress. Moreover, age stands for experience, and an older labor force is more experienced labor force. Nor is it clear that the older population saves less. Older persons, it is said, may be hesitant to spend down their assets because of uncertainty about health costs and the timing of death, as well as the desire to leave an inheritance. As always, such on the one hand, on the other arguments leave one in a sea of uncertainty, hence the need for historical facts to which we now turn. Alright. So I want to come back to this article in the next video, but I'm going to move on to Project 2025 because basically my on my tablet, I mean, I want it to have this video be fully synced up. So, alright, Project 2025, a wish list for a Trump presidency explained. A proposed Republican Party platform is expected to be approved to the party's national convention next week, but a much more detailed think tank proposal has drawn attention for some of its suggestions. Project 2025 was created by the Heritage Foundation think tank and runs for nearly 900 pages. Led by former Trump administration officials, it calls for the sacking of thousands of civil servants, expanding the power of residents, dismantling the Department of Education, sweeping tax cuts, a ban on pornography, halting sales of the abortion pill, and a whole lot more. There is a substantial agreement between many of the parts of the official Republican Party platform and Project 2025, although the think tank document is much more detailed and in some policy areas goes much further than the party line. There is a sharper contrast between the two when it comes to the issue of abortion, with Heritage urging much more aggressive anti-abortion policies. Democrats have highlighted Project 2025's more controversial proposals and called the document a blueprint for the second Trump term in office. However, Trump and his campaign have denied it or downplayed its influence. What links Project 2025 and Trump's campaign? It is common for Washington think tanks for all political stripes to propose policy wish lists for potential governments in waiting. The Conservative Heritage Foundation first produced policy plans for future Republican administrations in 1981 when Ronald Reagan was about to take office. It has been produced similar documents in connection with subsequent presidential elections, including in 2016 when Trump won the presidency. A year into his term, the think tank boasted the... Okay. Okay, skipping to the key proposals. Government. Project 2025 proposes that the entire federal bureaucracy, including independent agencies such as the Department of Justice, be placed under direct presidential control, a controversial idea known as unitary executive theory. In practice, that would streamline decision making, allowing the president to directly implement policies in a number of areas. The proposals also call for eliminating job protections for thousands of government employees who could then be replaced by political appointees. The documents the document labels the FBI a bloated, arrogant, increasingly lawless organization. It calls for drastic overhauls of this and several other federal agencies, as well as the complete elimination of the Department of Education. The Republican Party platform includes a proposal to classified government records, root out wrongdoers, and fire corrupt employees, pledges to slash regulation and government spending, and also suggests eliminating the Department of Education, but it stops short of proposing a sweeping overhaul of federal agencies as outlined in Project 2025. So, by the way, people that justify that possibly the assassination of Trump would stop this, but in a way, Destiny in this case would be like Jack Ryden from Metal Gear Solid when he killed General Armstrong. So the moral of that battle was that even though he was killed, he still expressed that the wars will never stop. It'll keep going. It's all been planned. Like it's all just systemic. And so the bad guy admitting that he was just a pawn and essentially killing him didn't stop anything. And Ryden just sort of looked like a jackass, perpetuating the anger and the struggle, you know. And so I'm not going to compare a video game to politics, but I think Steven is not. He's right to talk about the Republicans being hypocritical in this case and how there's always been mass gun violence, usually from right wingers. So eventually, a right winger was going to end up shooting Trump or something political in nature like that, which has been happening actually, because people justify like Nancy Pelosi being harassed and like people justifying like since the Democrats were given death threats that it's okay that Trump got this happening. Now, in a climate where conspiracy theories and political division wasn't like so potent right now, I don't think this event would spark such insanity, but it's really bad how Steven Destiny is dealing with this situation. Alright,